IVM.
This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. This is the 230th and 5th anniversary episode of Audiogyan. For this special episode, we have a special person who sits right at the intersection of art and education, which is where hopefully Audiogyan also tries to live. Today we have Manjima Chatterjee with us on Audiogyan. She's a drama explorer, teacher, and occasional writer. Well, occasional is a bit of understatement after she has won the Hindu Metro Plus Playwright Award in 2013. Manjima teaches drama and is serving as a head of arts program at Shiv Nadar School in Noida. Welcome, Manjima. It's a real honor to have you on Audiogyan.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. So this Audiogyan, we'll try and unpack some of your thoughts, philosophies, and try to understand the importance of theatre, plays, drama, and in general art in the education space. So I've come up with a few questions, and as I said, it's in the cusp of education and theatre or performing arts. So we'll be having like conversation which is like intertwining in between. Let's see how does it unfolds. So you've spoken at length. Also, I was listening to another podcast of yours, Movement and Me podcast by Natya Mandalam. You mentioned how did you got into this journey or what were your influences in the beginning? But just to set the ball rolling here, if you can also briefly share how did your passion for theatre and then storytelling and then education got ignited?
Okay, so that's actually a lot of things. But yeah, very briefly, well, I was always interested, I think, in storytelling. And I got introduced to drama very early on while I was still at school. I was always performing, and that was my first introduction. But I also started watching pretty religiously around the time I was in high school. And that was quite rare even then, in Calcutta. Because while there were a lot of people from colleges around, there were not that many people from schools in Calcutta, at least, Mm-hmm. In the smaller towns and suburbs, yes, definitely quite a few, but not so many in Calcutta, unfortunately. So I think people kind of started noticing the fact that this very young girl was around, and I was given the opportunity to watch some absolute legends at work, including Badal Sarkar, whom I followed for a while like a fangirl, just kind of watching whatever his troupe would put up. And then, of course, once I came to Delhi to study at Stevens, and the Sheikh Sahib came into my life, and everything else alongside. But I kind of lost touch with theatre for a while because I went into editing, and right after college, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. And my principal packed me off to this place called Valley School in Bangalore. It's a Krishnamurti school. And that was the first time that I really, kind of took education as a space seriously. Because at school, you're on the receiving end. You don't really think about it as, at least I didn't. Lots of people suggested to me that I might make a good teacher, but it never occurred to me that I would. So I really started taking it seriously while at Valley School. And then, of course, I came back, did my master's in sociology. And in the meantime, lots of things were happening. I was writing. I started to kind of get back to writing on and off. Was working as an editor, went on to have a couple of kids. And while, along the way I was at home, I was interested. I've always been very, very deeply interested in history and very, very kind of passionate about some things, some aspects, particularly of Bengal's history, very, very checkered, very interesting things that I've never been able to get out of my head. So I really wanted to kind of dive in deep, understand what makes the land tick. And somehow when I came across the Bengal famine, it was just something that hunger as an idea and as something that we have seen a lot of in this country. And in the meantime, I was quite closely connected with the NGO world, reading the works of Jean Drèze, Amartya Sen, and mostly, I think, a direct connect with the works of P. Sainath, which really kind of galvanized me. And that's how eventually Mountain of Bones and Two Men on a Tree came to be. But of course, along the way, a very important step, which I completely missed out, I don't know how, was that around 2006, when I was least expecting it, I was kind of writing bits here and there. And that actually, for the first time, being a part of writer's block in 2006, that really gave me a sense of that I could be a writer. I hadn't seen myself as a writer until then. I saw myself as a performer. I saw myself as maybe an academic, but I didn't see myself as a writer. So that was the first time. Yeah. So that's basically how it came to be. And then sometime around 2012, while I was researching Mountain of Bones, I was offered this job at Shiv Nadar School. Mm-hmm. And I was very, very, shaky about the whole idea of doing a full-time job. It just didn't seem like the right thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, sometimes fate has some things in store for you.
Yeah.
I just found a place that I really kind of fell in love with. And it was possible to do a lot of things in there. And that's what got me here. Since then, writing and teaching and some amount of academic reading, writing also. So it's been a good balance.
Yeah. Some is, and shorter or whatever, like an understatement. But I'm quite fascinated because even I was going through one of the articles in Krishnamurti School. I follow some of the work of J.K. Krishnamurti, and even a glimpse of such a legend touches you somewhere, and you are on another planet.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, can you share some bits of what happened in Valley School, which sort of moved you or gave you a direction, if that happened? Because it's a very powerful setup, right? So can you give some...
That's a very interesting word that you picked up, Kedar, when I think about education, I think one of the things that has always drawn me towards drama in education in particular is the notion of power. It's because, as a student in school, I never felt powerful. But in Valley, for the first time, I started to see that it was possible to have power, even as a child. It was possible for the child to be taken seriously, for the child to be at the center of the learning process. And it was mind-blowing for me because I came from a very traditional school system, where as a student, I just had to receive. And, even in college, college really they gave me a huge complex because I was from this absolutely nondescript school in Kolkata. It's not a nondescript school, but in Delhi it was, nobody had heard of it. And I was in St. Stephen's College, which was like the snobbiest of snobbish places that could be. I really understood what it is to be, a small fish in a big, big pond. And and along with that, this whole thing of everybody all our professors spent all of college telling us how much we didn't know. So, I think never in the education process until I went to Valley had I actually thought that it was possible to be powerful as a learner, to have any kind of power. And it was really quite something, And of course, much later, when I was, participating in this program, this postgraduate program called TEST, Theatre for Education and Social Transformation. It was curated by Maya Krishna Rao. It was run by Shiv Nadar University for a couple of years. Brilliant program. When I was there, I remember coming across this text called The Ignorant Schoolmaster by Jacques Rancière. Okay. And that actually talks about how transactions in the learning space can happen without anyone needing to be more powerful than the other or more knowledgeable than the other. That it is possible for the learner and the teacher to learn together, that it could be a process. So these were things that I, it didn't even occur to me. Plus, Valley has a very, very rich arts-infused learning space. It's not just, they have a wonderful art village, and it's not just the art classes that happen there. It just really infuses itself into every part of the learning space. So it was just brilliant. It was the first time I thought, wow, you can learn physics in the sculpture room. How do you even do that? Yeah, it was just brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm fascinated because I also did an interview with Neelkant Chhaya from SEPT, and he used a very interesting word which he said knowledge is explosive, right? And really can't be contained in walls, books, or libraries. So how like the next question which I wanted to ask you is that from there till your entire as you were working in the arts program for Shiv Nadar, like you must have reflected back or thought about how can theater be a tool for teaching children, especially anything complex, right? So can you share some bits of it? And also in that interview, you mentioned about Dorothy
Heathcote.
Heathcote's. Yeah.
Heathcote.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was intrigued by that also. So first, if you can just give me some instance of how do you arrive at teaching some complex stuff to children through education, through theater, and then maybe double click on Dorothy. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, the thing is that the thing about learning is that learning is something which should blow our minds. It is explosive in itself. The very design of it, the possibilities it opens up, right? For anyone. I mean, for me, I consider myself a learner more than anything else. I go into a learning space, maybe as a teacher, but I go in to learn, not because I have something very major to share with the others. There's a design, yes, but I go in with every expectation that I'm going to come out of this having learned something. So for me, theater is not and never was a tool for learning anything else. Theater is a pedagogy of itself. Theater is also a curriculum in and of itself. I mean, I've learned more history through theater than I've learned in any academic class. More history, more geography, more anything. I mean, the first time I understood some very important concepts in mathematics was when I was reading proof. So, it's not I think the thing about theater is that because it's so complete as an art form, it has knowledge in its content, its design is so adaptable. There are so many ways in which theater can come to be. Frankly, I mean, the way I look at it, I think all the things that happen in this world are drama. And it's when you understand that, it's when you walk up to someone and say hello for the first time, that's drama. What are you doing? That, everything from your body to the smile on your face to the energy transfer that happens when you look at the other person in the eye, that's drama. And that's what you retain. How many times do you actually remember what you said, between two people? You remember the feeling you came away with, right?
When you say
That's
drama, is it in a stricter sense or more philosophical sense? Because मतलब बोलते हैं कि ये भी माया है, वो भी माया है. So in that context, or
no, I mean it in an absolutely concrete way.
Okay.
Because frankly, that's what it is. When we look at pedagogy, for instance, when we look at teaching and we look at everything that goes into teaching, one of the things that we look at very, very closely is what is the teacher like when they come into the classroom. 80% of the times, maybe even more, the student is paying closer attention to who the teacher is than what the teacher is teaching. Right? And it sounds like an overstatement perhaps, but trust me on this. I've tried it out. This is drama. It's drama. It's how that teacher is taking the subject across, how they're setting the stage, how they're setting up the conflict, how they're arriving at the resolution.
Wow.
That's the drama. That is what makes the hook. And I think where drama in education comes in is it puts particular structures into space. And that's what we do when we take it into class. So just to and of course, I mean, the very big thing, coming back to the earlier thing that we were talking about, the very big thing that drama does is it just completely, lets you play with the sense of power in the classroom. Sometimes the teacher is more knowledgeable. Sometimes the teacher is less knowledgeable. Sometimes the teacher is absent. And you have to figure things out for yourself. And I mean, not absent in a physical sense, but, the teacher just kind of withdraws and says, I don't know. I'm not here. You have to figure it out for yourself. And in so doing, you present a challenge to the students, which they, it just gives them something to bite into, something to get into, to engage with. You see the sparks coming into their eyes, it's fascinating. So if somebody asks me, Can you teach physics through theater? I would say yes and no. No, because I cannot explain formula through theater. I cannot. But what I can do is I can firstly give the entire lesson a dramatic construct to enable the students to engage. At another level, I can help the students to think about, what does it mean? Why am I in there? Why am I studying this? What kind of impacts can it possibly have? Where can I go with it? How does it help me to be more human? And that is, I think, the power of drama in education. And that's what Dorothy Hethker does, to double click on her, as you said.
Yeah.
She just absolutely fabulous. I think for me, between her and Maya Krishna Rao, they just completely changed the way I learned to look at drama. I was already on that path. I was exploring some small things by myself, but Mantle of the Expert, or the various kinds of process drama, the various roles and their registers, and how they can be approached, how a whole learning philosophy can be in place every step of the way, how a teacher can reflect at every step of the way. What's a good point to halt the drama and ask a question? When do you step into the drama? When do you step out of the drama? What is a neutral body? It's just so many things. And she draws very heavily from Stanislavski and method acting. She takes that as her base. Of course, I mean, there are lots of other people. There is Boal. We can't talk about drama and education and not talk about Boal, especially with the kind of work he's done with power.
Yeah. And Ken Robinson, does he fit in the same set thing, or because I have just seen his
Ken Robinson comes from the other side. He comes from the education space, and he says, okay, let's infuse some arts into education. And Ken Robinson is talking about all forms of the arts. He's talking about developing the brain as a whole, So the thing is that they're both coming from a similar standpoint of saying that if you're going to be sitting on your backs, with your back straight and your arms stiff and not looking here, there, you're probably not learning. This, I mean, you and I, we've gone to school where our teachers have constantly said, sit straight.
Yeah.
Look at me. Look at the board.
Yeah.
And half the time you're thinking of something else. You're looking at, if there's a window, you're looking out of the window. If your friend is passing chits, you're looking at your friend. You're smelling the food that's in the desk and things like that. So what Ken Robinson and Dorothy Hethker do is they say that you have to bring the body into the learning space. You have to allow that to happen. You have to realize that we are whole beings. And if all of learning is only focused on what you can see and what you can read, and if that's the only kind of learning that you value, then you are doing yourselves and the planet a disservice. And I'm a very strong proponent of that. I completely agree with that. Because I've seen this happen. With the most book smart kids, the way they feel free when they come to the theater space, the way they open up, the way they engage, it's not something that happens in their, it's just a very different way of being as compared to how they're in their classrooms. Not just theater, though. This is true of music. This is true of dance. It's true of visual arts.
Yeah.
What we have seen these kids do, it's criminal to not consider that, to not see how that can enrich their learning experience.
In fact, that reminds me, I think I had read somewhere, or it was a running joke, I don't know, but teaching is like dieting. You're teaching, but you don't know whether the samne ka person is learning or not. Similarly, dieting, you're doing, but you don't know whether you're losing weight or not. You're just dieting. I don't know what you're doing. It was a joke type, but I want to just, again, slightly go deep into this, that you said when to hold or when to stop the drama, right? So if you can just give more nuances about any particular instance or any particular example through which the students are not really engaged or don't get too much into the myth of the story or into the story, so that they almost tend to neglect the facts, because then it's a kind of thin line, right? Where you are almost, the way we were taught about mythical stories, I am sure there must be a lot of underlying principles to it. Now, sometimes principles are tough to comprehend, so you wrap it with like interesting stories. But then the stories get forward, right? The principle remains some fallacies. So any nuances there that you can help share and as in share and help us envision कि ये कैसे handle होता है?
See, process drama follows a very specific set of rules, right? So you go into the drama with full awareness of the fact that you are going into drama. And you do, of course, it's done through various ways. Sometimes the teacher will, maybe adorn herself with a prop and change into somebody, So, for instance, I put a dupatta around my head and I'm playing a particular character. When I take off the dupatta, I'm back to being your teacher.
Oh,
and this is something that children understand, right? Because you do that in front of them very consciously, in a very aware way. So children have, actually, all of us have, but children are just more attuned to it, a sense of fantasy, which is very strong, right? So, in fact, the younger children get it more quickly. The older children struggle to hold on to their disbelief, So they'll say, no, I know you are not this, you're actually my teacher. And then, of course, as the drama builds, they will get into it. But the younger ones will simply go, oh, wow, you really came to our house? The daughter of the moon is in my house. So, it's that kind of thing of disbelief. But here's the thing, we've done it several times. I can give you a few instances. Most recently, we dealt with the story of Manu and the fish in the context of climate change. All across the world, there are these stories about waters rising, right? Noah's Ark, Manu and the fish. And, in mythology, when you study it, you say, oh, Dashavatar, Pratham Avatar, Matsya Avatar, and this and that. And then when you look at it from the concept of evolution, you say, oh, of course, life began in water. But then it's also possible to look at this story from the context of climate change. You can see the fact that the waters are rising and the world is drowning under it. And then it makes you wonder, did something like this actually happen in the past? Is this actually drawing from someone's experiences? The fun of mythology is that it can adapt itself to so many kinds of interpretations, right? You can draw so many different things from it. And that's also the danger of it a little bit, because then you have people who will draw all kinds of ridiculous things from it.
Yeah.
But see, now what we did with Manu and the fish was we did it as an interdisciplinary unit where there was a story that was told. And then it became a set of questions that Manu had, which then drove the learning around. And at the end of the learning unit, the students had to answer some questions and offer some advice to Manu. Now, that's a prolonged drama engagement where it's mostly storytelling-led. There is less of role play. There is less of active engagement in drama. Another example is, so the ideal thing that we did, the climate change one was with grade 6. But another example, for instance, is where we picked up in grade 9, the economics textbook for CBSE has the story of Palampur, which is a fictional village. And I mean, heaven knows how many Palampurs we have in this country. So it's very good. So it could be one of those Palampurs. So we pick up the story of Palampur, and the students, they first study the demography of Palampur. They construct an imaginary map for themselves where they immediately engage with ideas of who lives where. And that's like an immediate kind of entry to so many things, right? You look at social structures, you look at caste, you look at ownership, so many different things that come in, and we immediately have that conversation. So they draw a map of the village and then they study the demographics of it, because they take some sample demographics, they choose one, and then they distribute themselves into particular roles, which they then play. So that's when drama comes in. We get them to actually practice the different stages of life, imagine the different stages of life. So they conduct their research. We give them videos. We use resources like Pari. Sainath's Pari is a fantastic resource that we can use as reference, and we do. People's Archive of Rural India. It's a fantastic resource. So they study images, they read articles, and then they play the lives of those farmers. And then we take it to a conclusion where they have to vote as farmers for, not as farmers necessarily, but as farmers, as artisans, as landowners, as landless laborers. various different groups that they are divided into. And they have to vote for a candidate, and they have to vote on a particular issue that affects the village. So they actually study issues of marginality, of choice, of oppression, which are economic subjects and political science subjects that they're connected with. They understand the election process and they vote. And I mean, I would love to show you some of the writing that has come out of that, It's really deep, rich academic writing where students are asking big questions.
And this is which like grade, as in like 7th, 8th?
Grade
9. Okay, awesome.
Grade 9. So our teachers were initially very, very concerned. Grade 9, almost a board class. Academic time will go. How will we cover the subjects? And we discovered that they had covered, in 3 months, they had covered 4 chapters. And they didn't even realize that they had covered everything. They said, "Hamara to ho gaya, ab hum kya kare?"
Wow, it's so fascinating.
Because when students get into the learning process, then they read the chapter and they understand.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need to read the chapter with us. Because they're exploring those concepts through drama and discovering things for themselves. So the textbook doesn't allow them to discover anything. That's the problem. The textbook only tells you. But drama lets you discover things. Drama opens up questions. And in this particular, these generations that are coming to us now, curiosity is a big problem, because this overload of knowledge has made it very difficult for the students to be curious. We have to find ways of retaining curiosity, building curiosity. So drama is number one for us, therefore.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that you're probably just fueling the curiosity in the right channel or the right way, right? Yeah. And I keep reading quotes, so I generally tend to use a lot of quotes in my thought process. But like Einstein's even famous quote was there, right? So I never let go of the questions which I had when I was young. And that's the only secret. There's no other secret. It was just like
absolutely,
you're constantly curious about it. In fact, I'm trying to just connect the dot here also, you being from Kolkata. I have made a small poster in my house of Ramakrishna Paramhans where he says, as long as you live, so long do I learn. So it's a great starting point, obviously. So talking about learning, my next question was, in fact, I was looking at one of the interviews with Varun Grover, and he said, the interviewer asked him, ki, kaise likhte hain? Like, how do you write? And to that, his answer was, you have to be at least curious or deeply interested in 3-4 things other than writing. So on that note, I wanted to ask you this question that, like, for a playwright in you and the educator in you, like, first of all, do you believe in this, that you have to be curious and deeply passionate about few more things than the core subject that you're dealing with or the core area that you have decided to specialize on? And then if those 4-5 things, what you really look forward to? I mean, this is going to help me just fuel my interest in chalo ye bhi kar sakte hain as a
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't know whether I can generalize and say this applies to everyone, but it definitely applies to me. I think creative mind constantly needs fuel, and the curious mind even more so. So I think it's really important that we engage with the world in as many ways as we possibly can. Otherwise, one would be an ascetic, not a playwright. But I think, for instance, I've always been deeply passionate about history. And I also about literature, particularly I read a lot of science fiction. I love science fiction. I find it very, very engaging. Also, I think because I'm constantly curious about possibilities. So history, myth are areas that have always interested me a lot. I find a lot of relief in music. Music is my escape space. And I'm lucky I come from a family which has a lot of music. And even my partner and my children, they're all into music. So it's something which I do. That's the easiest way to say it. Brings me a lot of relief.
Mm-hmm. But have you given some thought that how does this help you reflect back on your work? I mean, have you seen any pattern, any observations ki I know there's nothing parallel कि ये पढ़ा इसलिए ये कुछ
नहीं, but
discover
it
ऐसा नहीं है.
connects.
Yeah.
It connects, it connects in weird ways sometimes. Like I love poetry. Every so often I'll stop and I'll read poetry. And I sometimes find the rhythms connecting with something, or I find myself unconsciously repeating a rhythm when I'm writing. So that sort of thing happens. But also, I think music particularly, and history, of course, helps me to see patterns. Music also, maybe it's just that, maybe it's just patterns. E.M. Forster used to say, as a writer, only connect, and that's it. I think my job as a writer is mostly to make connections. And that's what these other fields also help me to do. They help me to find connections and to be able to really link up with ideas, with occurrences, with patterns, possibilities. So
awesome. Yeah, it's great because these are the keywords which I keep regularly using. It's link, pattern. And what I've figured out is it's almost, you're trying to find out that abstraction. And when you find something in some field, you automatically see those two dots connecting. Arey, ye udhar bhi waisi. Yeah.
You do.
Cool.
And sometimes it's weird, you listen to a piece of music and you find resonance with it, with some piece of literature that you've read.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to explain how you made that connection, but it's just there and it.
Yeah. Sometimes when you try and articulate also, a lot of people don't get the connection also. And you really struggle hard to explain. And you're sometimes ridiculed also. I get that a lot of times. Yeah.
Which is okay. Which is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a short break here. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show.
So switching gears a bit and coming to the new education policy, I wanted to just understand that bit also, and then we'll move on to the last part of your plays. But you have handled arts as program for quite some time, and now you're like a curriculum head at Shiv Nadar School. So what's your view on the new education policy? I mean, is it going to be good? Is it going to ride on certain old things that we have learned? And जैसे मतलब मोदी जी ने योगा लाया है mainstream again, like evangelizing. वैसे, is there anything that you have observed or going to be beneficial, or maybe negative also? Certain parts will be negative for sure. Can you just share something about it?
So the thing is that with the new education policy that has come, it's important to understand that it rides on the shoulders of the National Curriculum Framework of 2005.
Okay.
Right? So the NCF of 2005 is the basis on which the NEP has come to be. But of course, it takes things further and it takes things in a different direction, particularly in higher education. It goes strongly in support of privatization, which, as somebody who has worked in the NGO space for many years and also in the education space for many years now, I strongly am against. I cannot support privatization of education. Education has to be a state subject. It has to receive state funding. Otherwise, it does not work. The thing is that what they're doing, and it's important to understand this, what they're doing is they're bringing in 20th century skills, 21st century skills, which are important. Let's not take away from that. It is important to cultivate those skills. It's important to look at critical thinking, creativity. It is important to understand what is citizenship. It is important to study all these things, right? And at the primary, early years level, at the middle years level, those are great things to do. So talking about elementary school, right? Right up to, say, 13, 14 years of age, right? The education that should be, was once upon a time guaranteed to every child, right? Which the government is slowly but steadily, as we can all see, making an effort to move away from. Now, that is a very dangerous thing. And the problem is that the approach to education, which is much needed, which is student-centered learning, which is which should offer every student personalized learning pathways, that under the present CBSE system is very difficult to pull off. And the reason that it's difficult to pull off is that the teachers are not trained. The systems have been set up as factory systems. So you have to completely overhaul them, right? Nobody wants to put in the kind of effort, add the kind of manpower, do the kharcha that they need to do to actually make it happen. But they want to be seen doing it.
Yeah,
right?
Optics is the biggest thing.
Maximal, absolutely, as we know. In present times, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
So they want to be seen doing it, but they're not doing enough. And frankly, much needs to be done at all ends, both in terms of, firstly, training teachers. You want something to come into being from 2023, and you don't have teacher training programs in place to deliver the kind of program that you want delivered. So they're doing a lot of online training. They really are. But yeah, I mean, you have to see that what a teacher gets from an online workshop is not something that's going to help her run the class.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have, or he doesn't have the kind of resources that the training expects you to have. Most of the teachers, what are they working with? Yeah, look at the reality. So it's a very difficult kind of a scenario which they have created for themselves. The intent, I will repeat, is very good. The overall intent is great because that's really where education needs to be, and it's where it's going worldwide, not just in India. But the difference is that worldwide, the transition is supported by the state. And in India, the effort is being made to let private schools, private colleges lead from the front. And that is always going to be a problem because private schools cater to an elite. Schools like ours cater to less than 1% of the children who are actually going to school. Even the middle level schools in the cities, the ones which offer training to their teachers, which offer support to their teachers, even they are not equipped in many cases to implement the kind of things that NEP wants it to implement. And certainly not by 2023. It's like around the corner. We're already at the end of 2021. So it's very complicated. Yeah. That's where it is. It's so at the one end, the teachers and the systems are not ready. At the other end, the university system needs to be rehauled to be able to accept the training, the way that CBSE is going into its final examinations, etc., the way it's redesigning the board exams and all of that. The university system is not ready for the students when they come in. They're still going by that 100% cutoff system, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy. How can you have a 100% cutoff? How can you call it a cutoff? But that's where we are. So the universities are not ready to receive the students who come out of the system, and the teacher training institutes and the resource managing institutes are not ready to implement it. But CBSE wants to put it in place by 2023. So I don't know, unless they think some magic, some fairy godmother will come and wave a magic wand. So I don't know what they're expecting. But this is what it is.
Yeah. So, as you said, intent is always right since I think last 10 years. The execution has gone for really bad. But is there what if Jiddu Krishnamurthy type few people, I mean obviously those kind of institutes come up then? Or that's not a possibility?
The Krishnamurthy schools have been practicing this kind of education for donkey's years.
Correct. No,
so
I'm saying if the privatization are exposed to that, the people entering from that lens, from that side.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
No, I'm just looking at some ray of hope that the way people are trained or in Krishnamurthy school, I mean, what if the privates take that approach? Then it will be good, or no, it will still cater to the elite?
See, private schools will take that kind of approach and they can afford to. You have to understand, see, a school like a Krishnamurthy school will have 15 to 20 students in one class. Their students will come from a range of backgrounds, but mostly, I mean, if not economically elite, at least thought elite. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? They will not come from a place where the parent is looking at the child coming out of the school system and immediately turning into an earning member, right? Kisko naukri mil jaye. Now, the problem is that in the current state of affairs, the kid comes out of the system and they're not equipped for the jobs that are available in the market right now. So you have a lot of jobs that are going khali and you have a lot of youth who are jobless, right? Because there is that mismatch is happening and they're just not equipped to learn the kind of skills that they need to learn, right? Which is why the conscious shift towards skills as opposed to knowledge building, right? To say that a student who emerges from the school system now needs to have the skills of learning on the job, critical thinking, needs to have the skills of being able to ask the right questions, learn something new as they go, right? So that's not available to the schools. So
what I gather is it's like the entire policy seems to be very reactive in nature. It's always
reactive. In India, it's always reactive. But see, NEP is doing a lot of good things. It's also predicting certain things. It's aligning itself with the right kind of mindset. The problem, like you said, is execution, right? So a few private schools can follow the Krishnamurti model and say, okay, we want our children to be reflective. We need to have one-on-one conversations with them. We can't have 45 kids in a class, right? Because the teacher simply does not have the mind space to be able to cater to those children. Okay, so let's cut down the class size to 20, 25 kids. And the private schools can get away with it because they can charge those few parents that kind of money. And the parents will bleed through their nose and ears and they will still give it because it's their child's education. Right? But the not so big private schools, the ones that don't have that kind of management or that don't have that kind of understanding, what are they going to do? They can't afford to not have 40 kids in the class now. So they have 40, 45 kids and they're going to try and drill the NEP through their heads. It's not going to happen. What kind of personalized learning can you have when the teacher is going crazy and it's one teacher and she's teaching 8 subjects in 5 classrooms and each classroom has 40 kids? That's the kind of ratio you're working with. So the poor teacher is going to go crazy. And how will she fulfill the demands of what the CBSE requires? So we're going to fall back to people will fudge. No, that's what they'll do. They'll fudge reports. They'll say ki ye hua, but it didn't happen. They'll try to bribe their way past it. That's what we've always done in this country. We take the shortcut because there are just so many things, so many factors that you have to, fight. It's just the way it is. So unless there is a complete rehaul of the way that government schools are run. So Delhi government, for instance, is really, it's something to look at because Delhi government is doing that. They're rehauling their schools. They are completely changing the approach. They're promoting entrepreneurship. They're promoting curiosity, questioning in their classrooms. They're bringing in laboratory learning. They're doing all the sorts of things. In their happiness curriculum, they have a lot of arts-infused learning. So they're bringing in all the elements of the NEP, but they're doing it with a strong intent. And as a government, they can do that, right? They have the resources, they have the power to take those decisions. And they're doing it. They're using it in the right way. I don't see anybody else doing it, but I don't really know very much about the other states. I do see Delhi doing it. And so it's a great thing. It's one government that's at least not taking its hand away from education. It's an important thing.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one Audiogyan with Geetanjali Kulkarni, also a theatre person, and have been actively working for education and a lot of stuff in the rural areas of Maharashtra. And she was also, I think, of the same opinion where the government has to do, it's not like good for privates to enter this space because she's dealing with children who have never seen crayons in their life, like Adivasi students who just go to school for the midday meal. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the truth because, so many schools don't even have loos, they don't even have toilets. And I'm not talking about, rural schools somewhere in the forest or something like that. I'm talking about city schools.
Yeah, just 60 kilometers out. Not even 60, 30 kilometers out.
Yeah. Not even 30 kilometers out. I'm talking about schools that are in Noida. Noida is like a smart city and whatever else for the UP government. The government schools don't have benches. Their rooms are in terrible condition. Half the time the classes are being held outside. The loos are not functional. Teachers don't come. It's a huge tragedy where, for the optics are very clear on what we want to show. And the reality is so very different, So execution is where the government always falls short.
Yeah. Hopefully with the skill program, we have some executionists in the next 10 years. Let's see. That's the only hope which I'm...
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Coming to the place part of it, which is the Two Men on the Tree and Mountain of Bones. Unfortunately, I have not read them or seen them, but whatever I was just going through, they seem to be very important plays. So any reason that you can share why they are not performed yet actively in the Indian theatre?
None at all. I have.
You want to quickly just tell about the premise of it, and maybe the listeners can infer why they are not?
Maybe they're I don't know, maybe they're very dark plays. It's possible. Mountain of Bones is a satire. It's a satire. It's partly musical. It's a very dark play. It's certainly that. Bits of mythology, it has bits of fantasy. But over and above, it's about hunger. And it's about how the government, and it's based at the time of the British government in 1943. But it basically casts a big question on all governments and asks, what is the intent? So there is a war machine, which is made up of people who are constantly, working to feed the machine while they themselves are dying. And there's a big question that came from a story by Manik Bandyopadhyay, who was a Bengali writer. He had the story called "Why Didn't They Snatch and Eat?" Chiniye Khaini Keno. So that's the Bangla name. And in that story, he postulates that when people are so hungry that they can barely keep themselves going, they don't have the ability to fight. So if you keep people famished, they will do whatever it takes to survive, and they will not fight you. So one of the tragedies of the Bengal famine was that the crops failed, but before that, all reserves had been sent out of the state. Other things also happened along the way. But when people were offered, when the poor people were traveling from Bengal and they were coming up, they encountered estates which had food, which had fruits on the trees. And they never raided anything. They never looted anything. They just came, they walked in a mass and they came asking for food. That's why Manik Bandyopadhyay says, why didn't they snatch and eat? Why didn't they loot? Why didn't they plunder? Why did they just accept that hunger was their lot? It's a deep question. It's a big question. And it offers some very uncomfortable answers. So in short, I think the plays are very uncomfortable. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe they're just very bad plays. Nobody wants to do them. I don't know.
No. That couldn't be, because now I'm going to read them.
Please do. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yes. I think what I can comprehend right now is because a very close friend of mine is right now in Belur, and he's been reading Vivekanand for last 10, 12 years. And he's deep into philosophy these days. And we keep chatting generally over the weekends a lot about, there are these 9 volumes of Vivekanand also, which talk about caste, which talk about different philosophies and stuff. I think we as probably Indians are too tolerant, and maybe that could be one of the reasons.
I don't know. I was reading this particular piece. I forget. I think it was by Shekhar Gupta. When he was following Mamata around on her, on her re-election campaign. And election campaign.
Sorry. When I say tolerant, is considering the 3,000 year civilization. It's not the recent one.
This whole thing of karma and everything. But anyway, coming back to the Shekhar Gupta story, he postulated actually that the people who objected to the communists and were able to rise up against and overthrow that government and usher in the Trinamool government were not very badly off. He says that in our country, we have seen dire poverty. We have seen people eating rodents. We have seen people, eating whatever they could get their hands on. So what brought in Mamata was that the state wasn't in such a terrible state. It wasn't seeing the worst days it had seen. So it was an interesting kind of postulate, again, tying back to what Manik Bandyopadhyay says. Just to be angry, there has to be a level of prosperity. It's an interesting thing to think about. And especially in the light of dictators and wannabe dictators, what kind of misery can keep people in exactly the same position year after year? Okay, probably not the kind of thing you want to discuss on your podcast right now.
No, yeah, and especially the 5th anniversary episode. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. And okay, so maybe we can conclude this on a happy note. The question is actually negative, but again, we briefly spoke about it. The entire education system has been designed, or at least from what I understand, is always been sort of set up in a way to make people obedient, to make students obedient, right?
The
marks for good.
System.
Yeah, the marks were given for good handwriting as opposed to what they are writing, or more disciplined sort of workers, right? And then last 70 years, we have seen more engineers, obviously. But I think it is changing with probably like the pseudo-democratic platforms like YouTube and Instagram. Things are changing. But like how people like me and like-minded folks can engage in spreading the message that the future of the country or future of our economy is in the creative space. I mean, is it, first of all? And if yes, then how can we, like, anything which you can share which will give that hope ki future is creative?
Oh, the future is definitely creative. And in fact, the future is here. It is the one thing that, this lockdown taught us was that when it is left to people to figure things out for themselves, they find ways. So this complete outpouring of creativity that the last 2 years have seen, where you have, everybody's dad and sister coming onto YouTube and Instagram, and everyone's a home baker and everyone's a designer and everyone's singing and writing songs, and it's fantastic. You know what is really probably the way ahead is to really look at understanding how this creativity can be given a direction, how it can become a force. Because it's under dire circumstances, people fight back, and people have fought back with creativity. It is the more the world goes into unpredictable spaces, the more structured systems like the old system of education will struggle to keep up. Because, are you familiar with Paulo Freire?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay, so Paulo Freire was a writer, an activist, wrote a fantastic text called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You must read it sometime if you can. There's another text by a similar thinker called Ivan Illich. He wrote something called Tools for Conviviality. They're both great books. Pedagogy of the Oppressed, particularly because he talks about this whole thing, and we're coming back again to what we started with, which is power. I read an apocryphal story, I don't know whether it's true, that it was one of Freire's disciples who actually worked on making the internet possible, because he felt that it would enable people to take knowledge in their own hands. And it would put creative power in the hands of people instead of, this whole thing of the Brahminization. And I mean it in a very generic sense, not in sense of the Brahmin caste in India particularly. But so the Brahminization of education was that, a few people would hold on to all the knowledge. And that was a very kind of a Brahminical structure, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because you came into school, you had nothing, you were an empty slate, so-called, and somebody would pour their knowledge into you. And this would keep happening in bits and parts until you became eligible by way of marks to be categorized a Brahmin or not a Brahmin, So that's been the kind of system of education that we followed all through across the world. And Freire specifically wanted to break that mold. He said the world can only advance if there is creative chaos and if there is creative power in the hands of individuals. Because when you give the ability to create and the ability to be heard to the poorest person, the humblest person, you will find that they have something to say. And they will find that they have something to say. And when they find that they have something to say, then the world will change. So I don't know whether we are there. I don't know whether we are going there.
We are certainly going there. I'm very confident. Yeah.
But I think I'm very hopeful. I think amongst all the Dhinchak pujas and the all kinds of content that we get online, there's a lot of absolutely brilliant, beautiful things that are emerging. And yes, I mean, if a kid on the street with a mobile phone in his hand can use YouTube to teach himself English, or can use YouTube to teach himself, or can use Instagram to teach himself how to bake or anything. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's how it should be. Everyone should be able to do all the things that they want to. Possibilities should be available. That's an ideal world, right?
Correct. In fact, the way you structured this, or the way you positioned this entire thing of the Brahminical structure, I have also similar parallel that initially the mic was with certain elites, right? So if you take the media industry, it was with certain people. The films were made by certain set of nepotism and those kind of setup. And then the people like Anurag Kashyap came in from nowhere and made people watch their stories. And then generations are getting inspired by them. So now the mic is almost with everyone because of mobile and because of the internet. And very soon.
Yeah, but see, even when Anurag Kashyap was there, he was still working with some structures.
Yeah.
But now you have people making films with iPhones.
Yeah.
Or even simpler phones.
Correct. Yeah, that's what. So now, in fact, I was listening to one, I think Kunal Kamra, and he was saying, अभी तो हम हमारी stories बता रहे हैं, हम oppressed की stories बता रहे हैं, जब oppressed अपनी stories बताने आएंगे तो फिर like कयामत आने वाली है. मतलब then there is like you're getting directly from the person who has been oppressed. Yeah, so it's a good space, but yeah, there's a trade-off also there, which probably is some other conversation. All right, I think this is a good note, but on concluding, do you want to give like any message to Audiogyan listeners about education at large, like one liner which you are always inspired about, and how hopeful are you about the future of through obviously art as a lens?
But I'm very hopeful about the future of arts as a lens, arts as pedagogy. But if there's one thing that I'd like to leave the listeners with, and something that I'd like them to think about, it's that if you reach out to someone with affection and spark some curiosity in their minds, you've probably done more to enrich a life than anything you could have done in your whole life. So it's something to think about. Reach out with affection and see if you can spark some curiosity. That's it.
Cool. On that note, thanks a lot, Manjima. It was great talking to you. I'm thoroughly inspired. I'm hoping to do like bunch of more interesting podcasts and wish to have you again on Audiogyan sometime. But
I'd love to come back, Kedar. Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.
Hello! It's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On This Round is on Me, Gauri is joined by Shweta Nanda. They talk about the financial independence and how it is to be a woman entrepreneur. On Anish Thing, Anish welcomes ultra-marathon runner Shivani Gharat. Shivani shares her journey of how she ran her first marathon, the mindset of a runner, and what it actually takes to run a full marathon. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Naveen, Akash and Shreyas talk about the Korean band BTS serving in the military and its repercussions. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita discuss Wing Greens and their latest acquisitions and about the Indian sexual wellness market. And on Shunya One, Sheila Datya is joined by Dinika Bhatia, CEO and founder of Nuttigritties. They talk about coming from a business family and Dinika's journey in creating healthy and guilt-free snacking. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We have some exciting new merch out there for you. Also, do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And do remember to spread the word about these shows and any other shows you might be listening to. Appreciate them, rate them, and review them wherever you are listening to them. You can also check out all our other shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. Volvo XC40 Recharge, Bumble, Heads Up for Tails, Kotak Privy League Program, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thanks guys, without you this would not be possible.
Do you often find yourself surrounded by conversations about Web3, blockchain, NFTs, DAOs? What are these terms and how do they affect our future on the internet? So many questions, but don't worry, we've got answers to all your questions. Hi, I'm Eklavya Bhattacharya, and on our show Future Proofing, we try to decode the impact of these future technologies on various industries with experts and tech enthusiasts. Tune into new episodes coming out every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app and the website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.